She overheard the billionaire CEO and his friends mocking her body at his private gala. Her revenge destroyed his family legacy. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of breathing. 300 people held perfectly still as the prosecutor pressed play on the audio recording. Through the speakers, laughter echoed. Rich, male, careless laughter. Then a voice. Smooth, educated, dripping with old money confidence. I am serious, the sex is incredible. There is something about a woman with actual curves, you know. Not these stick-figure socialites. More laughter. So when are you introducing her to your mother officially? A pause. Then the same voice, lower now, conspiratorial. Come on, President, you have met my mother. Can you imagine her reaction if I brought Isadora to a family dinner? She is perfect for now. Fun, uncomplicated, no social ambitions. But let us be real, the Northcliffe heir is not going to marry a community art teacher from Queens whose idea of haute couture is whatever she finds at sample sales. On the witness stand, Isadora Valente sat perfectly still. Her short dark hair was styled professionally. Her navy suit was impeccable. She did not look at the defendant's table where Grayson Northcliffe had gone pale, his expensive attorneys suddenly very interested in their notes. The recording continued. I will have to hit the gym hard after we are done. I have gotten too comfortable with her cooking. Another few months and I will need a whole new wardrobe. The laughter that followed was ugly. Knowing. The sound of men who had never faced consequences. The prosecutor stopped the recording and turned to the jury. That is Grayson Northcliffe. Mocking the woman who loved him. The woman who would eventually notice something he never thought she would pay attention to. The questionable origins of his family's priceless art collection. Isadora finally looked at Grayson. Their eyes met across the courtroom. He looked like he wanted to say something. She looked like she had already forgotten him. Have you ever been in a room where you thought you belonged, only to discover you were the joke? Have you ever heard the person you love mock the very things you are most insecure about? What would you do if you discovered your entire relationship was a lie and you were just a pleasant distraction until someone better came along? If you have ever been underestimated because of how you look or where you come from, this story is for you. Hit subscribe because you are going to want to see how one woman turned humiliation into the most devastating revenge imaginable. This is the story of how Isadora Valente brought down 4 generations of privilege with nothing but her expertise and her refusal to stay broken. 8 months earlier, Isadora had stood on a different kind of stage. The marble terrace of the Northcliffe estate in the Hamptons. Behind her, through floor-to-ceiling windows, 300 of Manhattan's elite glittered beneath crystal chandeliers at the annual Northcliffe Foundation Gala. She wore a champagne-colored gown that Grayson had insisted on. It clung to curves she had spent years learning to love. Curves that felt suddenly like evidence in a trial she had not known she was facing. The May evening wrapped around her like silk that was too tight. She had excused herself to catch her breath, to escape the feeling of being examined by women who looked like they had been carved from marble by Renaissance masters. The Northcliffe garden stretched out below. Strategically placed lights made the sculpted hedges look like something from a fairy tale. A fairy tale where she was supposed to be the princess. Isadora set down her champagne glass. The bubbles had gone flat. She moved toward the stone balustrade, letting the cool air settle her racing heart. Behind her, the terrace doors were open. Voices drifted out on the spring breeze. Masculine voices, warm with expensive liquor and the easy confidence of men who had never questioned their place in the world. Grayson's voice rose above the others. That familiar patrician tone that had once made her feel chosen. What happened next would change everything. I am serious, the sex is incredible. There is something about a woman with actual curves, you know. Not these stick-figure socialites. Isadora froze. Her hand gripped the cold stone balustrade. Gray, you dog. That was Preston Whitmore, Grayson's prep school friend, his voice thick with amusement. So when are you introducing her to your mother officially? The pause that followed lasted only seconds. But Isadora felt it stretch into an eternity. She could not move. Could not breathe. Every muscle in her body locked as she waited for his answer. "Come on, President, you have met my mother." Grayson's laugh was easy, relaxed. "Can you imagine her reaction if I brought Isadora to a family dinner? She is perfect for now. Fun, uncomplicated, no social ambitions. But let us be real, the Northcliffe heir is not going to marry a community art teacher from Queens whose idea of haute couture is whatever she finds at sample sales." The laughter that erupted made Isadora's stomach turn. She pressed her hand against her abdomen, against the curves that Grayson had just praised and mocked in the same breath. "Then what is the endgame?" A third voice. Marcus Chen, a venture capitalist Grayson had been courting for a business deal. "I am 29. My father wants me to settle down, but I am not ready for the whole society wife thing yet. Isadora is a pleasant distraction until I find someone appropriate." Pleasant distraction. The word sliced through her with surgical precision. "Though I will admit," Grayson continued, and she could hear the smile in his voice, that same smile that had charmed her at the gallery opening where they had met 8 months ago, "I will have to hit the gym hard after we are done. I have gotten too comfortable with her cooking. Another few months and I will need a whole new wardrobe." The laughter that followed was different this time. Knowing. Cruel. The sound of men who had always treated women like interchangeable accessories to be worn and discarded. Isadora's legs moved without conscious thought. She walked carefully, quietly, down the terrace steps and into the garden. Her heels sank slightly into the perfect lawn. Behind her, the conversation had already moved on. Stock portfolios. Summer houses in the Hamptons. She was already forgotten. She made it to the rose garden before her knees gave out. She sank onto a stone bench hidden behind a trellis heavy with climbing flowers. Their scent, sweet and overwhelming, mixed with the bile rising in her throat. Pleasant distraction. Too comfortable with her cooking. Not appropriate for the Northcliffe heir. 8 months. 8 months of believing that Grayson Northcliffe, scion of one of New York's oldest families, had fallen in love with her not despite her ordinary background but because of it. Because she was real in a world of artificial smiles and strategic marriages. Because her passion for art and her genuine warmth had touched something in him that his privileged world had left cold. She had been such a fool. Isadora pressed both hands against her stomach. She had always been fuller-figured, soft in a world that worshipped sharp edges. For years, she had fought against the internalized voice that said her body was wrong. She had learned to dress it with confidence, to move through the world with her head high. And then Grayson had arrived in her life like a fairy tale made flesh. Tall, devastatingly handsome, with old money elegance and a smile that made her feel like she was the only woman in any room. He had pursued her relentlessly after that gallery opening. Flowers delivered to the community center where she taught art classes to underprivileged children. Reservations at restaurants where the waiters knew his name and his preferences. Weekend trips to his family's house in the Hamptons. She thought of all the moments that should have warned her. His mother's icy politeness when they had met accidentally at the theater. The way his friends' wives had looked at her with a mixture of pity and amusement. How he always found excuses when she suggested he meet her family, her friends, the life she had built before him. The signs had been there. She had simply chosen not to see them, too dazzled by the fantasy of being chosen by someone like Grayson Northcliffe. Her phone buzzed in her small clutch. A text from Grayson. "Where did you disappear to? Mother wants to meet you properly." The performance was not over. She was still expected to play her role. The pleasant distraction who did not know her place. Isadora stood slowly. She smoothed the champagne dress over her hips. Her reflection wavered in the dark window of the garden folly beside her. In the dim light, she looked like a ghost. Translucent. Insubstantial. A pleasant distraction fading into the background of someone else's real life. She deleted the text without responding and kept walking. Away from the gala, away from the lights and laughter. Her heels clicked against the stone path that led to the estate's front gates. Security was stationed there, but she was Grayson Northcliffe's girlfriend. They nodded and let her pass without question. The spring air carried the scent of possibility and wrought in equal measure. Tomorrow, she would have to face what came next. Tonight, she just needed to get away from the sound of that laughter. From the memory of Grayson's voice casually dissecting their relationship like it was a business merger that no longer served his purposes. She made it to the street before the tears came. Not the pretty, delicate tears of romantic movies. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook her entire body and made her ribs ache. A taxi slowed. The driver's concerned face appeared in the window. "You okay, miss?" Isadora climbed in and gave her address in Queens. The apartment Grayson had never visited, always claiming his schedule was too demanding. The apartment she now understood he had been too embarrassed to be seen entering. As the cab pulled away from the Northcliffe estate, Isadora looked back at the mansion glowing on the hill like a beacon. Inside those walls, Grayson was probably searching for her now. Annoyed that his pleasant distraction had wandered off before the evening's performance was complete. He had no idea that the woman getting into this taxi was not the same woman who had arrived on his arm 3 hours ago, glowing with pride at being included in his world. That woman had died on a terrace while listening to the man she loved reduce her to a joke shared among friends. The woman in this taxi was someone new. Someone forged in humiliation and rage. Someone who was done being anyone's pleasant distraction. Isadora did not sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, still in the champagne dress, and made lists. It was what she did when emotions threatened to drown her. She organized them into actionable items, problems with potential solutions. The first list was short. What I know about Grayson Northcliffe. His family's wealth came from a combination of old money and the Northcliffe Group, a private equity firm that specialized in arts acquisitions and luxury real estate development. His great-grandfather had been a robber baron who had made a fortune in railroads and laundered his reputation through aggressive philanthropy. The Northcliffe Foundation, which hosted the Gala, funded arts programs and museum acquisitions across the country. Grayson sat on the boards of 3 museums, 2 cultural foundations, and his family's company. He was being groomed to take over from his father, Richard Northcliffe, within the next 5 years. His mother, Catherine Northcliffe, was old money from the Van Buren family. Connections that opened doors even Northcliffe wealth could not unlock. Grayson's weakness, his only vulnerability in a life of privilege, was his obsession with his family's legacy. He wanted to be remembered not just as another rich heir, but as a cultural patron. A man of refined taste who elevated the arts. It was why he had attended her gallery opening 8 months ago. Why he had initially been drawn to her knowledge and passion. He had seen her expertise. He just had not seen her as a person worthy of keeping. The second list grew longer. What I know about art. Isadora had a master's degree in art history from NYU, earned while working 2 jobs and caring for her aging grandmother. She had spent years authenticating pieces for small galleries, building a reputation for spotting forgeries and understanding provenance chains that others missed. She knew the art world's underbelly. The questionable acquisitions. The pieces with murky histories. The collectors who cared more about investment value than cultural significance. She knew things about the Northcliffe collection that would make Grayson's blood run cold if he understood she had been paying attention during all those gallery tours he had given her. Showing off his family's acquisitions like a peacock displaying his feathers. During their relationship, Grayson had given her private access to the Northcliffe estate's galleries. He had walked her through room after room of paintings, sculptures, ancient artifacts. Explaining provenance with the casual confidence of someone who had never questioned the official story. But Isadora had questioned. She had noticed things. A Roman fresco whose documentation seemed too convenient. A Renaissance painting with gaps in its ownership history that corresponded suspiciously with World War II. A Greek kylix that looked remarkably similar to pieces UNESCO had flagged as stolen from protected archaeological sites. At the time, she had pushed the observations aside. Told herself she was being paranoid. That a family like the Northcliffes would never traffic in stolen cultural property. Now, sitting in her queen's apartment with mascara streaking her face and her heart broken into pieces, those observations took on new significance. The third list was the hardest to write. Who I am without him. When dawn broke over Queens, Isadora had 3 pages of notes. Her eyes burned with exhaustion and tears shed and suppressed in equal measure. The champagne dress was wrinkled beyond repair. She looked like the aftermath of a disaster. She felt like the beginning of something new. Her phone had exploded with messages overnight. Grayson's texts progressed from confusion to annoyance to what appeared to be genuine concern. Where are you? People are asking about you. ISA, this is not funny. Please tell me you are okay. I am worried. Call me. She responded with 5 words. We are done. Do not contact me. His reply came within seconds. What? What are you talking about? What happened? Isadora blocked his number. Then she blocked his friends, his assistant, anyone connected to the Northcliffe world. She stood, peeled off the champagne dress, and dropped it in the trash. She showered until the water ran cold, scrubbing away the scent of his cologne that clung to her skin. The memory of his hands on her waist as they had danced before everything shattered. When she finally slept, she dreamed of terraced doors and laughter that echoed forever. 2 days later, Grayson showed up at her apartment. Isadora heard his voice in the building's lobby, charming Mrs. Chen from 3B into buzzing him up. She stood behind her locked door, watching through the peephole as he emerged from the stairwell. He was dressed casually. Jeans and a cashmere sweater. What she now recognized as a costume. Grayson Northcliffe playing at being a regular person, visiting his regular girlfriend in her regular life. Isadora, please. His voice carried through the door. I do not understand what happened. Just talk to me. She said nothing. Watching as he knocked again, then leaned his forehead against the door. If I did something wrong, let me apologize. We can fix this. Fix this. As if she were a business problem requiring the right approach, the correct strategy. I know you are in there. Your neighbor told me she saw you come home. Another knock, harder this time. Frustration bleeding through the concerned boyfriend performance. This is ridiculous. Open the door. There it was. The entitlement that had always lurked beneath the charm. Isadora pulled out her phone. She texted him, watching through the peephole as his phone buzzed. I heard you. At the gala. On the terrace. Every word. She watched the color drain from his face. Watched him read the message twice, then look at her door with new understanding. His mouth opened, closed. For once in his privileged life, Grayson Northcliffe did not know what to say. His fingers moved across his phone screen. Her phone buzzed. Let me explain. It was not what it sounded like. They were drunk, I was just going along with their jokes. She typed back. You called me a pleasant distraction. You said I was not appropriate to marry. You mocked my body and my background. I did not mean it. I was trying to fit in with them. You know how those guys are. I know how you are. That is enough. She watched him stand there, visibly thinking through his options. Calculating which approach might work. Finally, he knocked one more time. ISA, I love you. We can work through this. The words that would have shattered her resolve 2 days ago now landed like pebbles against stone. Love. He did not even know what the word meant. When she did not respond, Grayson left. She watched him descend the stairs, shoulders tight with anger he was finally allowing himself to show. The door to the building slammed hard enough to rattle her windows. Isadora returned to her kitchen table and her lists. She had work to do. Now here is where it gets really good. If you are enjoying this journey from humiliation to victory, drop a like and let me know in the comments. Have you ever gotten revenge on someone who underestimated you? Keep watching because Isadora is about to bring down an empire. For 3 months, Isadora disappeared into research. She quit her teaching position at the community center. She could not afford the distraction. She worked part-time at a gallery for income, and spent every other waking hour verifying her suspicions about the Northcliffe collection. The Roman fresco she remembered from Grayson's tour. She traced it back through dealer records, auction house catalogs, shipping manifests. The trail led to a protected archaeological site in Pompeii. UNESCO had flagged the piece as stolen in 2003. The Northcliffe Group had acquired it in 2005 through a dealer in Switzerland known for trafficking looted antiquities. The Renaissance painting. She found documentation showing it had hung in a Polish family's estate until 1943. Then it had vanished during the Nazi occupation. It resurfaced in 1987 in a Northcliffe-funded acquisition, purchased through a dealer in Argentina with known connections to art looted during World War II. The Greek Kylix. Traced back to an illegal excavation in 2001. Sold through 3 intermediaries, each with murkier credentials than the last. Landing in the Northcliffe collection in 2004. 12 pieces in total. 12 works of art with questionable provenance. 12 crimes hidden behind the Northcliffe name and the assumption that old money families did not need to steal. Isadora lost weight during those 3 months. She forgot to eat, surviving on coffee and the cold fury that burned in her chest. She cut her dark hair short because she was tired of the woman in the mirror looking like someone Grayson Northcliffe had once dated. She became someone new. Someone harder. Someone who understood that revenge was not a single act but a commitment. A daily choice to pursue justice even when it hurt. Grayson tried to contact her 17 times during those 3 months. She ignored every call, every email, every handwritten letter delivered to her new apartment in Brooklyn. She heard through mutual acquaintances that he was telling people she was mentally unstable. That she was fabricating evidence because he had broken up with her. The narrative almost worked. Grayson was charming, well-connected, believable. Isadora was just a scorned ex-girlfriend from Queens. Until she walked into the offices of the New York State Attorney General's Cultural Heritage Crime Unit. The attorney assigned to her case was a woman named Diana Reeves. Sharp-eyed, skeptical, dressed in a no-nonsense suit that said she had seen every scam and lie the art world had to offer. Isadora sat across from her and laid out 3 folders. 12 pieces. Documented provenance chains. Dealer records. Shipping manifests. Expert authentication reports she had paid for out of her own dwindling savings. Diana opened the first folder. Her eyebrows rose. She opened the second. Her expression hardened. By the third folder, she was leaning forward with the intensity of a hunter who had just caught a scent. How did you get access to this information? Diana asked, studying a photograph of the Greek Kylix that Isadora had traced back to an illegal excavation site. I used to date Grayson Northcliffe. Isadora kept her voice steady. He gave me tours of their private collection. I have a master's degree in art history and authentication experience. I recognized inconsistencies in the provenance documentation they showed me. After we broke up, I started digging deeper. Diana flipped through page after page. This is, if even half of this is accurate, we are talking about one of the largest cultural heritage crime investigations in recent history. It is all accurate. Isadora met her gaze. I have verified every piece through independent sources. I have testimony from dealers willing to confirm the Northcliffe Group's acquisition practices. I have documentation showing they knew or should have known the origins of these pieces. Diana studied her for a long moment. Why are you doing this? This will destroy them. Isadora thought of Grayson's voice on that terrace. Pleasant distraction. Not appropriate. The casual cruelty of someone who had never faced real consequences. Because some legacies deserve to be destroyed. She said. And because these pieces deserve to go home. Diana Reeves smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had spent years watching rich men escape consequences. Who was tired of it. Who was ready to do something about it. Let us get to work. The investigation took 18 months. 18 months of depositions and authentication analyses. Of international inquiries that made the Northcliffe family's attorneys very nervous. Of subpoenas and expert witnesses and forensic examinations of documentation the Northcliffes had assumed would never be questioned. Isadora worked as a consultant for the Attorney General's office. Her expertise in provenance research was suddenly in high demand. She authenticated pieces, traced ownership histories, connected dots that others had missed. She watched from a distance as Grayson's carefully constructed world began to crack. First came the search warrants. Federal agents and art crimes investigators descending on the Northcliffe estate, their Manhattan penthouse, their storage facilities. Photographing and cataloging pieces that had hung in their galleries for decades. Then came the indictments. Grayson Northcliffe. Richard Northcliffe. 3 senior partners of the Northcliffe Group. All charged with multiple counts of trafficking in stolen cultural property, conspiracy, and fraud. The media exploded. The Northcliffe name, synonymous with culture and philanthropy for 4 generations, was suddenly associated with theft and criminal arrogance. Grayson lost 20 pounds while waiting for trial. His expensive suits hung wrong on his frame. The golden boy of Manhattan society looked like a man who had forgotten how to sleep. The trial was everything Isadora had known it would be. Exhausting. Public. Brutal. She testified for 2 days, walking the jury through provenance chains with devastating precision. Explaining how she had first noticed discrepancies during private tours Grayson had given her. How she had documented everything with the thoroughness of someone who knew she would be challenged at every turn. Grayson sat at the defense table, staring at her the entire time she testified. She never looked directly at him. He was a stranger now. A defendant. A man whose family legacy was being dismantled piece by the woman he had once called a pleasant distraction. The defense attorneys tried to discredit her. Suggested she was a scorned ex-girlfriend fabricating evidence. That her expertise was questionable. That she had misunderstood what she had seen. Isadora's composure never broke. She answered every question with calm precision. Each answer another nail in the Northcliffe coffin. Then came the moment that changed everything. The prosecution's closing argument. The prosecutor, a woman named Catherine Mills, stood before the jury with a laptop and a speaker system. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "you have heard testimony about provenance chains and authentication processes. About stolen art and criminal conspiracies. But I want you to understand who Grayson Northcliffe really is." She pressed play. The audio from the terrace at the Gala filled the courtroom. Grayson's voice, unmistakable and damning. "I am serious, the sex is incredible. There is something about a woman with actual curves, you know. So when are you introducing her to your mother officially? Come on, President, can you imagine? She is perfect for now. Fun, uncomplicated. But the Northcliffe heir is not going to marry a community art teacher from Queens. Isadora is a pleasant distraction until I find someone appropriate. I will have to hit the gym hard after we are done. Too comfortable with her cooking." The laughter that followed echoed through the courtroom. Ugly and knowing and cruel. This is the man, Catherine continued, who treated Isadora Valente as disposable. Who mocked her body, her background, her worth. The same woman whose expertise he never valued enough to think she might be paying attention. Might be noticing things. might have the intelligence and determination to bring his entire criminal enterprise crashing down. The jury heard it. The media heard it. The world heard Grayson Northcliffe reveal exactly who he was. Not just a criminal, but cruel, shallow. A man who had never valued anything he could not use. His mother, Catherine Van Buren Northcliffe, sat in the courtroom gallery. Her face was stone, but Isadora saw the moment something broke behind her eyes. The realization that her son was not just guilty of crimes, but of being exactly the kind of person she had raised him to hide. The verdict took 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Grayson's face went from disbelief to realization to something like despair. His father, Richard Northcliffe, clutched his chest. Within minutes, paramedics were rushing him out. He had suffered a heart attack. Richard survived, but the man who emerged from the hospital was a ghost. The patriarch who had ruled Manhattan society for 40 years was broken. Wheelchair-bound and silent, watching his legacy crumble. Grayson was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The Northcliffe Group collapsed within a month. Assets frozen. Reputation destroyed. The family name that had meant power and prestige was now synonymous with theft and arrogance. Catherine Van Buren Northcliffe had to sell the estate to pay legal fees. The Northcliffe Foundation was dissolved, its assets redistributed to legitimate cultural heritage organizations. Everything Grayson had valued was gone. Isadora sat in the courtroom when the sentence was read. She wore a navy suit she had bought with her first paycheck from her new position as Director of Provenance Research at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Her short hair was styled professionally. She carried herself with quiet confidence that had nothing to do with any man's approval. When Grayson was led away in handcuffs, he looked back one last time. Their eyes met across the courtroom. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no lingering love. Just a distant acknowledgement that this chapter had finally closed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. "Ms. Valente, how do you feel about the verdict?" Isadora faced the cameras with calm composure. "I feel that justice was served. Not just for me, but for the families whose cultural heritage was stolen. For the countries whose artifacts were trafficked. This case was never about personal revenge. It was about holding people accountable for crimes they thought their wealth and status would protect them from." Did you ever love Grayson Northcliffe? I loved who I thought he was. But that man never existed. She did not mention him again. Because that was the truest revenge. He had reduced her to a pleasant distraction, a temporary amusement. She had reduced his entire legacy to rubble and moved on to build something better. So let me ask you. Do you think Isadora did the right thing? Would you have done the same? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, empowered, validated, fired up, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. 5 years later, Isadora Valente stood in a gallery in Rome. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating a Renaissance painting that had just been rehung on the museum wall where it belonged. The piece had spent 74 years in the Northcliffe collection, stolen from a Polish family during the Nazi occupation. Now it was home. Isadora had championed its repatriation. Negotiated with Italian authorities. Ensured its safe transport. It was her job now. Returning stolen cultural property to its rightful owners. Rewriting the narratives that men like Grayson Northcliffe had built their legacies upon. She wore a simple dress that fit her curves comfortably. Her short hair was now a signature style, featured in art magazines and cultural heritage publications. She had given lectures in 12 countries. Written a book about provenance research and cultural crimes. Become one of the most respected voices in her field. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus, her boyfriend of 6 months. He was a curator at the Uffizi, funny and kind and completely fascinated by her work. They had plans that evening. A quiet dinner at a small restaurant near the Ponte Vecchio. Nothing fancy. Just two people who enjoyed each other's company. She smiled and tucked away her phone. Somewhere in a federal facility, Grayson Northcliffe was counting down the final months of his sentence. She knew because his release date had been mentioned in an article about the lasting impact of the case. He would emerge to a world that had forgotten him. To a family name that was now a cautionary tale. To a future that held none of the promise he had once taken for granted. His father had died 2 years into his sentence. Heart failure, the death certificate said. But everyone knew it was shame that killed Richard Northcliffe. His mother lived in a modest apartment in Connecticut, her old friends from the Van Buren circle avoiding her calls. The estate had been sold to a tech billionaire who turned it into a corporate retreat center. The Northcliffe Foundation's name had been stripped from museum wings and cultural programs. Everything they had built over 4 generations was gone. Isadora hoped Grayson had learned something. But she did not particularly care either way. She had won. Not by getting him back. Not by forgiveness or reconciliation. But by becoming someone who did not need his approval, his apology, or his presence. The painting glowed under museum lights, returned to its proper context after decades of exile. Isadora studied it for a long moment. A Madonna and Child, painted in 1502 by an artist whose name had survived 5 centuries. Stolen by Nazis, acquired by American thieves, finally returned home. Some things came full circle. Some wrongs could be righted. She turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking on marble floors. Tomorrow she would fly to Athens to consult on another repatriation case. Next month, a symposium in London. Her calendar was full of meaningful work, real relationships, a life she had built entirely on her own terms. Outside, Rome glowed in the golden hour. Tourists and locals filled the piazza, living their lives, chasing their dreams. Isadora stood for a moment, breathing in the warm air, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting. Her phone rang. Marcus, asking if she wanted to meet earlier, maybe walk along the Tiber before dinner. She said yes. Because this was what real partnership looked like. Someone who valued her expertise. Who thought her intelligence was attractive. Who would never reduce her to a pleasant distraction because he actually saw her as a person, not an accessory to his life. As she walked through Roman streets toward a future she had built from ashes, Isadora thought about the girl who had stood on that terrace 8 years ago. Crying in the rose garden. Believing her world had ended. That girl had been wrong. Her world had not ended. It had just begun. Let me tell you what this story teaches. Your worth is not determined by who wants you. Grayson's rejection revealed his shallowness, not Isadora's inadequacy. The right person celebrates you. They do not hide you. Expertise is power. Isadora's knowledge became her weapon. Education and skill cannot be taken away. What you know matters more than who you know. Revenge done right is called justice. Not petty, not emotional. Strategic and legal. Isadora did not just hurt Grayson. She exposed real crimes. She made the world better while destroying him. Your body is not the problem. Their character is. Grayson mocked her curves, but the issue was his cruelty. Someone who truly loves you does not mock you in private. Body shaming reveals the mocker's ugliness, not yours. And finally, walking away is winning. Isadora did not need his apology or reconciliation. True victory was building a life where he became irrelevant. The best revenge is becoming someone they cannot touch. Some betrayals cannot be forgiven. And that is okay. You do not owe second chances to people who showed you who they are. Isadora did not take him back, and that made her story powerful. She chose herself. Her career. Her dignity. 5 years later, she is thriving and he is broken. That is the ending women deserve to see. Not every story ends in reconciliation. Sometimes the happy ending is him watching you win from prison. Your value does not decrease based on someone's inability to see it. If this story inspired you, here is what I need you to do. Subscribe to Mr. Steven's Stories, because we tell stories about people who refuse to stay down, who turn pain into power, who win on their own terms. Like this video if you believe in justice over reconciliation. Share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. And comment below. What would your revenge look like? I read every single one. Remember, you are not defined by who underestimated you. You are defined by what you built after they walked away. I will see you in the next story. Stay powerful.